We got a traditional, so that's a traditional IRA. What is a Roth IRA? Was that somebody named Ross from Friends? No, probably not.
I think it was.
His name was Ross, not Roth.
No, but I think it was like a senator.
Oh, okay, great.
Isn't it?
I think you're right. It is Senator Roth somewhere. So I'll give it a shot at a Roth.
Do it, because I think I haven't really paid attention to IRAs.
All right. So here is what.
And before you mentioned that, what I'm going to say.
Now you're gonna off me track.
I'll tell you towards the end why I haven't paid attention a whole lot to IRAs.
All right. Little surprise at the end. Traditional IRA, we know what that is. You actually have got taxed money that is going into that IRA. A Roth IRA is money. Well, hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
How the heck are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Terrific. Want to welcome everybody to the Steve and Steve Show. Hope you're having a wonderful time wherever you are right now. I want to thank you for jumping in on this show with us right now. We've got an interesting one.
We do.
We always have an interesting one.
That's right.
I suppose.
So, thank you for finding us, push and play. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button down below. Add some comments. Like this show, we are doing this show based off of a suggestion we got in one of our comments. So thank you, Dan, for making that suggestion. And if you have a topic that you'd like for us to cover, go ahead and do that down in the comments, and we certainly will consider all topics.
Absolutely. So the topic that Dan asked for is based on something called an IRA.
That's right. So an individual retirement account.
Individual retirement account.
Yep. So Dan's question was more of what's the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA.
Okay.
So and before we get into that topic, we'll do the disclaimer that we don't have any financial advisory licenses. We're not.
All this is, we're not financial advisors. This is us giving a little bit of our opinions and our insights that we have. But obviously, go and do your own research on this.
Exactly.
I mean, we're smart, but yeah, maybe we're not.
Right. We did look up some numbers to be as close to accurate as we can. Yep. So we will cover that. So let's start with what a traditional IRA is.
All right. And what is a traditional IRA?
So through the United States government, because other countries may have something else that they call it differently, but what we know is with the United States government. And so the retirement account is for retirement, so it's money you're going to put away.
So you're not going to have access to it right now when you put that money away.
It basically locks it up with penalties, right? So if you do set something up and a year down the road and you don't meet the qualifications of withdrawal, then they hit you with penalties.
Right. I think you get potentially taxed, and there's some sort of a 10% typically. All those things can change.
Right.
Like
so
a 10%
you have
penalty.
Yeah. So right now it's a 10% penalty on top of the income tax that you would have.
Right.
So if you meet certain income tax brackets, you get that. Then you get your 10%. So
okay, I want to just clarify something though. An IRA, in my mind, is a much simpler thing to get into as an individual than say, well, some of the things you have to do if you're going into a 401k, for example, right? 401k is typically you're working for a company. That company is putting this money into a retirement or matching money that you're putting in. And there's a lot of strings attached to it.
Yeah, the biggest difference is the 401k is generally with a company,
an employer
that you work for, and they give you access, and they do have their own. They definitely have their own rules. The company will have their own rules, and then whoever their custodian or trust facilitation. So it might be one of the bigger stock firms that's managing it for them.
Right.
They'll have additional rules on top of that, what can be done.
I guess my point is that I could, and folks out there could typically go out tomorrow, work with a certain, let's say a brokerage if they were doing it on the stock side of thing, and open up an IRA.
Right.
And start funding it.
Right. And,
Whereas-
and you can actually go to your local bank
And do it there.
and do it there too. It
Right.
doesn't. It's basically declaring a certain account as the IRA, right? So when you do that,
Not a lot of hurdles to jump through.
no, there's not.
basically.
It's, you just
And-
go to a financial institute, ask them if they have IRAs, and if they do, then they'll set you up with the right paperwork
Great.
and get you started. And with that IRA, you mentioned it was flexible. So with the traditional IRAs, and most people think that they'll go to a brokerage firm or a bank. Well, they're going to only offer you what they have available to sell.
Like stocks, if you're in a brokerage firm, you can buy and sell
stocks, money markets,
options.
Yeah, I guess options would be a part of that. Mutual funds is what I was
Mutual
trying
funds,
to.
sure.
You
ETFs.
short circuit my mind
Sorry.
on throwing in options
Sorry.
out there. So looking at a traditional IRA, what does that do? So basically, you get your paycheck, and your paycheck's already been taxed, right? So you have that money, and now you want to take some of that money and invest it into an individual retirement account. So what you can do is you can put that money into that account. There's a limit, and we'll get into those limits. But what that does is it gives you a tax deduction
Right.
for your tax forms, which helps lower your tax liability.
Right.
And then any money that you earn inside that IRA, like if you have a stock that's, maybe it starts at $100, it goes up to $150, and you sell it, so you have a $50 gain. That gain just stays in the IRA. It has to be in the IRA, and that gain is not taxed at that specific time.
Right. So let me stop you on that for a second, because anybody that has been doing any kind of trading in the stock market, and especially if you're doing something where you buy this stock today and it goes up and you make a 50% gain on that, and you're just doing it in your brokerage account. Well, when you make that 50% gain, you have to pay what's called capital gains on that. And it's a tax that you'll have to pay on the profits that you made on that.
Right. But
To Steve's point,
to clarify that,
Mhm.
if you to do that same trade in one year,
I'm
then
sorry.
you get income taxed.
Right.
But if you wait 1 year and 1 day, then you go to the capital gains tax. But in an IRA, you're shielded from that tax at that particular time. Later, with a traditional, when you start to pull it out, then that becomes income and you pay taxes at that level.
At that later level of whatever your is. So
So if that is your only income, and whatever you pull out, whatever level that is. Now, if you're pulling out and you're making money someplace else, that adds to your income, so the tax might be higher,
Exactly.
could be lower. So it depends on when you take it out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because it's called a short-term capital gain if it's before the year, a long-term capital gain if it's after the year. Either way, in the traditional IRA, and this is how we'll wind our way back to the IRA, in the traditional IRA, you're kind of postponing that tax event, whatever the taxes are, until you take it out in your retirement, which typically you would think you're not making as much money, and so your tax bracket might be a little lower, and you might have a better tax advantage down the road on that. I mean, that's the theory, right?
Right.
Unless you're a anyway, that's the theory.
Right. So the whole idea of the IRA is that it's sheltered from the tax, right?
We gotta be sheltered from the tax, man.
For a period of time. Now, if you take $1,000 and put it in just a regular account, and you put this, a similar $1,000, that's another set, into an IRA that's in the similar account, and you do the investing very similar, then the idea is the one that's outside of the IRA will be taxed each time as you go.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So if you do those curves, right, those analysis, the one that's in the IRA will have a better momentum first.
Right.
And the other one will have a lower momentum because it doesn't have that
tax burden, right?
Doesn't have the tax burden, so it can build more money, and then you get that snowball going.
You get that
faster.
compound almost.
Right,
kind of effect, right.
Now, to complicate this even more,
Let's not complicate it. Let's not.
then we can introduce the Roth.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you complicate it with the Roth, which isn't that big of a
It's not that.
complication,
It's not that.
let's do say what that limit on that traditional IRA. Today, in 2020, an individual can put in $7,000 for the year. So like right now, well, not now, but for next year, you could put in $7,000 of your taxed income, let's say, and that will actually lower your taxable income by that $7,000. So that's the tax benefit you get with a traditional IRA.
Right, now that you mentioned the 7,000, isn't there a makeup if you're a certain age?
I'm sorry, yes, there is. If you are 55
Is
and
it on
older.
your list?
It is on here. Let me see. I should know that. Go ahead and talk while I'm getting.
All right, so if you're a certain age, he's gonna look it up. It's in the 50s that you get to make up. So basically, the government's saying, well, if you didn't put money away, we're gonna give you a short period of time where you can actually put a little bit more to kind of make up time that maybe you didn't do if you were younger. So obviously, you want the compound effect to kick in on any of your investments. So the sooner you can get started, the better. So if you're in your 20s, get started now. If you're in your teens, better yet. But the best time to start is
now. Oh, and it's 50 or older, by the
50
way.
or older. So we would qualify.
You qualify now. Dang.
Well, probably within the 6 month or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So
what's a Roth? We got a traditional, so that's a traditional IRA. What is a Roth IRA? Was that somebody named Ross from Friends? No, probably not.
I think it was.
His name was Ross, not Roth.
No, but I think it was like a senator.
Oh, okay, great.
Isn't it?
I think you're right. It is Senator Roth somewhere. So I'll give it a shot at a Roth.
Do it, because I think I haven't really paid attention to IRAs.
All right. So here is what.
And before you mention that, what I'm going to say.
Now you're gonna off me track.
I'll tell you towards the end why I haven't paid attention a whole lot to IRAs.
All right. Little surprise at the end. Traditional IRA, we know what that is. You actually have got taxed money that is going into that IRA. A Roth IRA is money that has not been taxed. Wait a minute, I've got it backward. I apologize. A traditional IRA, you are putting money in out of your, however you're getting your income, and then you're going to get a tax benefit that year for that money that you put in. A Roth IRA, you're already taxed on whatever income that you got, and you're putting that into the Roth IRA. So the thing is, you already paid your income tax on the money, and now you're just putting money into this Roth IRA. The real benefit of this is when you get to that 59 and a half that you can start taking your money out as retirement, because you already taxed it way back there at your 20s or 30s or whatever age you are now, you actually won't pay taxes on that money that you pull out of the Roth IRA. It's really a pretty exciting thing. Not today per se, but later on, use that same kind of capital gain thing that you talked about with your
don't lean too far out of the camera.
With your line going and all of a sudden you're not going to be taxed on that money that's coming out.
The whole amount, right?
Yeah.
So the gains as well.
Right.
So if you put, let's say over a period of time, you put $10,000 in there, and it because of compound effect and some good decisions, it grows to $1 million. That's $1 million that you can pull out, and there is no tax on it currently.
Yeah, that's a true statement. Currently, it could change. You could.
So, and that brings me to.
That's been going for a while, though. Roths have been around for 30, 40 years.
Roths, no.
30. At least 30.
No, I haven't been married that long, and the reason I know this is because when we got married, we set up a traditional, and the following year is when they had a conversion. You could actually take your traditional and convert it to a Roth, and we did that with one of our accounts because we really didn't understand the Roth at the time.
Well, shoot, this place doesn't give the thing.
So it's maybe 20,
agree to disagree.
close to 30, but not quite.
All right. Anyway.
So to wrap up, I do want to say one thing about the IRAs that people need to take into consideration when they're looking at opening an IRA. Okay, and that is that it is a government type controlled account. So I believe in 2002, a small little island called Cyprus had similar accounts, and the government country decided that they were going to grab all of the individual retirement accounts and make them part of the government's pension plan, and told the citizens that they will take care of them in retirement.
Very kindly, we'll take care of these for you.
Right. So, with it being kind of a government-sanctioned vehicle, the rules can change on these rules.
And they do each year. It may not be a big rule, but they do change. To your point.
Potentially, depending on what's going on in the economy and what they're able to, pull in to fund their different activities. This is an area that they could change, and that includes, how a Roth is treated later.
Yeah.
Right. Because the Cyprus thing, a lot of countries have seen how they did that and said, that might be a good idea. So keep that in mind. That's one reason I don't really like IRAs. I look at it and say, well, why don't I just build a portfolio that's not tied to that type of vehicle, and then I'm only paying around the income tax. And the last time I checked, the government isn't taxing 100% yet.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I'm actually getting up there to the point where I'm going to start to be able to take some of this stuff out, so it is less of a concern, but I think it's a very legitimate concern. And, there's never zero risk in any of this.
Right.
So you want to be diversified. I think personally that there is a good reason to get an IRA started, even if it's something like, you do your $6,000 or $7,000 minimum, and then you start doing some real estate or doing some trading or something with that to create a stronger, you're going to get education out of what you do with that money anyway in the IRA.
Right.
And it's going to build potentially to something.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that because I think a lot of people don't really understand the IRA concept. When they hear IRA, they're probably thinking mutual funds.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not specific. You don't have to be in mutual funds.
Right.
You can be in cash. You can be in gold and silver. You can be in a whole lot of other things. Right. There is a way you can set up an IRA, and I'm just going to tease you a little bit, but you can actually have an IRA set up and have actual physical real estate that you picked out in that IRA.
Meaning a house, a rental house.
It'll be investment, so you couldn't be part of it. But just to throw a teaser out there, you need to look at IRAs, either traditional or Roth, and figure out which one's best for you. And then once you figure out which one's best for you, what are you going to invest once you have that vehicle set up?
Pop us a question if you have one. Send us an email. Let us know if you have any questions. We probably ought to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think this is a good topic. We beat the thing to death.
All right.
So,
any last minute subscribe, please. Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, we are inching our way to a milestone, and every new subscriber helps.
Every single new subscriber matters.
If you're not one that does subscribes, on YouTube, make us your first channel that you subscribe to.
Why not?
That would be pretty cool. So, all right, Steve. Well, we failed at having a drink, so we have to do our for that. So
have a great one.
Thanks
again for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Bye.